we have reached the 13th Doctor Era, and this will certainly be tough to get through. I'll try my best to explain my thoughts, but honestly, most were so forgettable that I struggled to remember the plot lines of certain episodes. Honestly, a couple I fucking fell asleep during and didn't care enough to go back and rewatch them. Plus, people like The Critical Drinker and Beware and JXE do a much better job of explaining why this era is so fucking shit, better than I ever could. But I will still try to discuss my thoughts to the best of my ability. Quick note is that similar to Trial of a Time Lord, I will talk about Flux episode by episode, rather than the overarching series-long arc as one full story. Just makes it easier for me. First, we have the only extremely horrible story on this list at number 29, Can You Hear Me? This episode is absolutely rage-inducing for me, but I will try my best to curb my anger for you guys. Unfortunately, the term offensive has pretty much lost all meaning nowadays because of, well, you know why. But this episode most definitely is the tried and true meaning of offensive, for 3 really big reasons, but one certainly lesser than the others, so I'll get into that first. And it's not necessarily offensive, but you'll see. The missed potential of this episode is staggering with the immortal gods Zelen and Rakaya. You could have made an entire episode just dedicated to them and their lore, but they didn't take advantage of that at all. Something along the lines of enlightenment or something more high concept. Hell, the 3rd series with the series-long arc could have been dedicated to them. I've always been fascinated with godlike beings, and I feel like here it was squandered. Like there could have been so much more, but the most interesting things that happen is the stuff in flashbacks. Do something Eldritch related. The proof is in the pudding, guys. So that made me annoyed. Then you had the situation with Graham at the end of the episode where he describes this incredibly serious worry he has about his cancer returning, but the doctor doesn't offer anything supportive or encouraging because she's too socially awkward, quote unquote. Fuck the hell off with that fucking horse shit. The doctor, no matter what incarnation, would have offered fucking something, anything reassuring. Even 6 pre-Big Finish would have said something encouraging. But this is so far beyond out of character that it makes my head explode. And poor Graham has to shuffle back into the corner while dealing with this psychological fucking crisis he has now with no support. And the fact it never gets brought up again after this. Like, what the actual fuck? But that still isn't the worst thing about this episode. The absolute worst thing about this episode is the complete and utter disrespect to mental illness and specifically depression. This episode feels like it was written by someone who on more than one occasion has told an extremely depressed person to just cheer up or be happy or get over it. Because that's what this feels like. The episode begins with Ryan's friend, who I don't even remember the name of, just goes to show how important he is, feeling down, having a surface level conversation with Ryan, and then Ryan leaving. Then at the end of the episode, Ryan tells him, hey, get help, and he does, and that's it. Wasn't that just so fucking easy? Depression is #cured, guys. Way to go, Chris Chibnall, you magic man. This honestly could have been the entire episode. So, more missed potential. Yay. Somehow, dealing with Ryan's friend, who I don't know was fucking established before this episode, who is a second away from possibly committing suicide, and there's no Ryan to support him. It could have possibly been a very serious, albeit more exaggerated, take on life with the Doctor. Aliens of London did touch on this, but this episode could have taken it even further. Due to Ryan traveling with the Doctor, he doesn't see the warning signs, and only notices when it's almost too late. Sure, it would have been really dark, but if you're willing to comment on mental illness, you have to treat the fucking thing seriously. You can't go in half-cocked and expect people to care just because you're attempting to comment on it with a character that has not been shown before this point. Just watching this episode was easily the most frustrating experience I have ever had watching a Doctor Who episode. I would even go as far as to say it's the worst Doctor Who story, period. The missed opportunities, the weird subplot with the Muslim girl, the Doctor acting the most out of character, period, and the downright offensive nature with how it treats depression. How it tries to take it seriously but has absolutely no knowledge of doing that correctly, and it comes off almost as bad as teasing someone with depression. So, fuck this fucking episode. Next are the horrible stories with number 28, Arachnids in the UK. Honestly, this episode is so bad, it's almost fucking hilarious. I try my best not to talk politics on this channel because I simply hate talking about it, so I will try to skirt around it the best I can to avoid any sort of controversy. This episode essentially involves an over-exaggerated evil mustache-twirling villain named Jack Robertson, who is so one-dimensional, it's honestly hilarious with how horribly written his character is, just so that he can essentially be a stand-in for a certain someone and immediately date the episode once the fucking thing got released. His big thing is he pretty much dumped radioactive materials underneath his hotel and caused these spiders to get bigger. So this episode involves the TARDIS team trying to stop those spiders. There is pretty much nothing to this episode and is only used to showcase the idiocy of the main villain who is a stand-in for that certain someone. But the writing is so fucking bad, it ends up actually proving the villain right. The Doctor's solution in this episode involves slowly suffocating these spiders in a locked room over the course of days while they lose oxygen, which is immensely fucked up, by the way, especially for someone who has been the champion of the underdog since the character's inception in 1963. So the fact that the Doctor is willing to murder them in such a horrific way is detestable. Meanwhile, the villain suggests shooting them for a quick and simple death. I don't know about you, but if I had the choice between getting shot in the head or slowly suffocating in a room over the course of days, I'm choosing the former. But guns bad, so there goes that argument. So yeah, the episode has horrible writing, is a piss-poor attempt at political commentary, and the story as a whole is boring and forgettable, outside of the stupidity that it is. Number 27, Orphan 55. This one is surely infamous due to its forced message inserted at the end of the episode. While the design for the monsters is pretty cool, this is just a bad episode because it has so much stupidity attached to it. The subplot with Kane and Bella was uninteresting, and Vilma was ungodly fucking annoying. I just wanted her to fucking die so badly with her incessant screaming. The main plot is a simple base under siege story, but without any of the intrigue that makes them great or memorable in any way, shape, or form. It's pretty much just bland crap with a forced message, as well as being extremely obvious with its twist. It's not the worst Doctor Who episode of all time, as many people have said, but it is pretty terrible. It mainly comes from the ending, and the fact it rips off the 6th Doctor story, The Mysterious Planet, which was also not a very good story, so why rip that off is beyond me. It gets an extra half point purely because the monsters look cool. But that is it. Moving on. Now we get to the bad stories, and there are quite a few. Starting with number 26, Survivors of the Flux. This is the pinnacle of idiotic Chibnall with its stupid writing, plot contrivances, and introducing 20 million locations that cause the story to jump all over the place. Great. This simply makes the pacing absolutely horrific. We get more stuff with the Division and the Doctor's past, which is eye-rolling and fucking stupid, and I will get into that more soon enough. This episode is just confusing, and despite Jericho being a decent character, Kate Stewart showing up again, and one or two interesting ideas, it just falls flat. It mainly feels like a filler episode that only exists to set up the finale. Number 25, The Battle of Ranskor of Kolos. This one I, for the most part, fell asleep during, so I don't really remember enough of the plot. I just remember Graham's idiotic and tacked-on arc for wanting to kill Zim Shah, even though he had no inclination of doing so beforehand. Most of the episode relying on plot contrivances when it came to Zim Shah being showcased as a god by these two Mary Sue-like people. Then there was some shrinking Earth plot, I think, which sounds similar to the Pirate Planet, but again, not nearly as good. But that's kinda it. Number 24, Kerblam. Ah, this glorious amount of stupidity. The story and commentary of this episode was literally handed to the fucking writers on a silver fucking platter, and they still managed to fuck it up. So this episode deals with the fucked up nature of the warehouses and treatment of workers by a company named Kerblam. Should be wham bam thank you ma'am, easy to right for this episode, right? Nope! That would involve competence on somebody's part, and that clearly wasn't what they were going for. So essentially, it has the Doctor acting out of character again for being pro-corporation for some reason, and it's revealed that the villain of the piece is not Kerblam, but a disgruntled worker named Charlie who is against the poor treatment of the workers in the factory. Yes, you heard that right. The villain of the episode is a worker who is getting treated like shit by the company. And on top of that, the Doctor gives a speech at the end of the episode that it's not the system that's the problem, but the little guys that try to take advantage of the system to benefit them after getting fucked over by said system. Are you actually fucking kidding me right now? This was literally the easiest fucking episode to write a commentary for, and you somehow botch that? Then they parade around that the computer who runs Kerblam was essentially the actual victim, despite the fact the fucking computer killed Charlie's crush to further torment him, and the human characters who run the corporation are pretty much let off scot-free with the promise that they'll do better. This episode should have written itself. The only reason I give it points is that there was some potential there, and I'll give them that. But everything is so completely botched that it makes me wonder if this was written by the evil computer itself. Sheesh. Number 23, Power of the Doctor. 13's Regeneration Special. It's typical bloated Chibnall writing at its finest. 100 locations, 40 subplots, non-stop fan service, grinding the episode to a halt for mediocre character development, and just a bloated fucking mess of a special. It's doing so much, but doing so little at the same time. The Master's plot is nonsensical and convoluted, and just a typical plan by the Master, but blown up to scale to make it more epic, as well as being way more convoluted, as I stated. His Cyber Masters, or whatever, make an appearance along with the Daleks, which is nice, I guess. Sacha Dhawan is back as the Master, and he's good. He's again deliciously evil and chewing the scenery like it's his goddamn job, and I do enjoy that. It was nice to see Doctors 5 through 8 again, as well as David Bradley as his version of the first. And Ace as well, even if she barely served a purpose outside of fan service. But not Tegan, because fuck Tegan. And Kate Stewart, also good to see. And Katie Manning and Bonnie Langford as Jo and Mel, respectively. And then, of course, William Russell himself, Ian Chesterton. Honestly, seeing him was probably the best part of the episode. And he looks damn good for 95. I love how this has just become me naming all the fan service crap in this episode, because that's all this is, forced fan service in a terribly written and nonsensical special. The reasoning for the Doctor regenerating was dumb and felt tacked on. Like, the Master shoots her with a thing filled with energy and she's damaged. It was just so dumb. Like, this episode almost forgot it was a regeneration story, realized it at the last second, and they just put it in there in the last, 5 minutes. I will say, though, the regeneration itself wasn't half bad. It doesn't have the arrow-wanking speeches that 11 and 12 had, although I do like parts of both, and it's not ungodly stupid and egotistical like 10's was. It's probably the second best of the new era if we're going by the regeneration scene as a whole, because 9 into 10 will always remain the best of New Who, period. So yeah, the fan service is of course fun, and the regeneration itself is okay, but this was a shit end to an already shit era. Number 22, Ascension of the Cybermen / the Timeless Children. Speaking of shit, the Timeless Child. But before we get into that, we will get into the story as a whole. Ascension of the Cybermen isn't actually too bad. It's not the worst thing ever, but it had some interesting bits in regards to a future dominated by the Cybermen. Kind of like Dalek Invasion of Earth, except not nearly as good. So it kind of had that going for it, even if most of the episode was, crap. Then it pretty much shit the bed with the Timeless Children. Ignoring the whole twist, and I will get into that, the stuff outside of that, like with the companions, kind of followed the first part of the story. Bad, but not horrible. Again, some interesting tidbits with them fighting back against the Cybermen, as well as the lone Cyberman stuff. But pretty much everything on Gallifrey in regards to the Master and the Doctor, pure trash. As many people have said, it's just the Master giving a PowerPoint presentation on why the Time Lords are assholes. But here's the thing, though. We already know they're assholes. Just look at Colin's speech from the end of Trial of a Time Lord.
All my travelings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
We know how terrible and corrupt they are. But hey, Sixth Doctor too old for you? Just look at Night of the Doctor, showcasing that the Time Lords became indistinguishable from fucking Daleks. So why in the fuck is the Doctor surprised that they would do something as fucked up as experiment on a child and take the secret of regeneration for themselves? They literally said it themselves in both their 6 and War incarnations. I swear to fucking Christ, it's points like these that I wonder if Chibnall even watched the fucking show. Because with shit like this, it almost seems like it. But we have actual evidence that he did back in 1986, so here we are. Then we have the whole timeless child twist. That the Doctor was actually not just some random guy who got fed up with the Time Lord's bullshit and left, but was actually super interdimensional space Jesus. Yeah, because nowadays a character can't just be nobody anymore who just wants to do good to do good. No. They have to be the most special and most amazing character there is, showing people that no, you can't be a hero or great just because you want to be. No. You have to be born special from the very fucking beginning. Absolutely go fucking fuck yourself, Chris Chibnall. Go fuck yourself. So yeah, even if the episode was good, that boneheaded twist would have brought it down to the shittiest of shit. The only reason this actually gets some points is because the previous episode wasn't terrible. And let's not get started with how the Timeless Child fucks with almost 60 years of continuity. Let's just move on for the time being. Number 21, Once Upon Time. Honestly, pretty sure I fell asleep during this one. I think it was about a temple or something. I think this was the episode that showcased Vinder a bit more, as well as the stuff with Azura and Swarm. I remember the crazy cliffhanger with the companions being stuck, but that's kind of it. Don't really remember most of it. But from what I saw, it was kind of dumb. Again, moving on. Number 20, the Halloween Apocalypse. The start of the Flux event, and it sets everything up for the rest of the season. Yet it feels so empty. Like there's no passion involved, similar to Power of the Doctor. Dan intrigued me, but his character pretty much goes nowhere after this and is just shitty comic relief for the rest of Flux and the specials. The plot with Carvanista was ridiculous because it is a part of a Chibnall staple, having someone showcased throughout most of the episode as a bad guy, but then in the 11th hour, whoop, nope, turns out they're a good guy, even though it goes against the entirety of their character of what was previously shown. So I found that to be a bit ridiculous. I will say the makeup on Carvanista looks very Doctor Who, because while it is reasonably oppressive, it's incredibly silly. But yeah, we get introduced to all our plot threads for the season that barely go anywhere or are just uninteresting, like Claire being taken by the Weeping Angel, the stuff with Vinder, Azura and Swarm, the Sontarans, the Lupari, and other such nonsense. It purely exists as setup for other shit and is just uninteresting and empty for most of it. Makes Iron Man 2 look like fucking pure gold. Number 19, Praxeus. More Chibnall hallmarks with a million locations during the entire episode, way too many supporting characters you don't care about, and the last-minute twist that changes a person's allegiance. Although, Chibnall is changing it up with a person that was originally good and made them bad. Wow, really throwing a wrench in your status quo there, Chibnall. Anyway, I think this is supposed to be some social commentary against pollution or something, but it makes little sense and is not wholly interesting. It has some decent tidbits here and there, but nothing that made me invested in the story and raised more questions than answers by the end. Number 18, the Ghost Monument. filled to the brim with ridiculousness. First off, you have the infinitesimal opening in regards to the possibility of the TARDIS crew getting picked up by a spaceship. Then the one-dimensional characters, then the story for characters not making sense with their decisions, the surface-level idea of the Doctor not liking guns, which, by the way, does a complete 180 by the end of the season for some idiotic reason. Then, the Doctor not remembering her own plan in regards to the TARDIS. Oh, and lest we forget the idiotic timeless child tease and the reference to Zimshaw's species that sets up a story arc that is completely ignored until the final episode. Yeah, as I said, lots of stupidity, and the plot is boring as well. Could have introduced a season-long arc of the Doctor trying to find her TARDIS, but nope, finds it immediately, and that is the end of that. Oh well. Number 17, It Takes You Away. I liked some of the higher concept ideas with the parallel universe being a sentient being that was unable to be compatible with our universe. That part was really cool. Just the rest of it was not incredibly interesting. Like with most of these goddamn stories. What Eric did to his daughter is so insanely fucked up, and he pretty much gets off scot-free because reasons. The stuff with the fake creature in Han actually could have been a great episode in and of itself, or at least good. Like, make it an actual creature, or make the twist better hidden to have it work for the entire episode. But it's pretty much these two kinda interesting ideas smashed together into one episode, limiting the potential for both and making both ideas complete shit. I like the ideas, but the execution is horrendous. Number 16, Fugitive of the Judoon. So this is pretty much just a mediocre retelling of Smith & Jones with a shitty tacked-on twist in regards to the whole timeless child nonsense. It doesn't have the emotion, the passion, or the intrigue of the original story. Now, I know it's not a beloved story or anything, even though I do think it's damn good. But it's goddamn Genesis of the Daleks compared to this crap. Nothing else really to say except that I wish Joe Martin was 13 instead of Jodie. Because fuck me did she show the charisma and character of the Doctor more so in one episode than Jodie did throughout her entire run, as well as her succeeding appearances after this. Number 15, Demons of the Punjab. Yes, while this does showcase a rather unknown event in history to a lot of the world, most of this episode relies on dumb shit and the Doctor being racist. Again, it has the idiotic twist of, oh, the bad guys aren't really the bad guys because the plot demands it. Great. Even though they were purposefully set up as the fucking bad guys with a threatening aura and dialogue, nope, turns out they were good, and the Doctor was just being a racist against the alien race because that's who they used to be, but now they're not. Okay, the stuff with the main plot isn't too bad, all the characters seem okay, and it's intriguing, but the dumb shit kinda ruins it. Honestly, I would have preferred to see this as a pure historical. Cut out the alien shit and most of the problems are solved. It still wouldn't be amazing, but it would have been better than this. Outside of the alien stuff, the real villain is a bit one-dimensional, and Yaz is kind of being a bitch at the beginning and end of the episode. Not great, but it could have been better. Number 14, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. The episode that started it all. And it sucked. It does the thing where it tries to do so much, but does so little. We barely get a handle on Jodie as the Doctor. We barely get a handle for her companions. The villain sucks. The story is fucking boring as shit and relies on way too many plot contrivances. And the death of Grace, I feel, was handled very poorly. Not just here, but for the rest of the series as well. Zimshaw is a ridiculous villain and memorable for all the wrong reasons. It seems like here Jodie watched a bad 11th Doctor episode like Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and was like, I'm going to base my personality off of this. But the problem is, and we'll get to this when I talk about her and her era, she's constantly changing throughout her era depending on the writer, essentially. So here, she just acts like goofy Matt Smith when they were going overboard with his character by the end. You don't really know how to feel about her because she's supposed to sort everything out by the end of the episode, and the next episode sort of gives us that full Doctor personality, but we don't get that here. It still feels like she's high off regeneration or something. So this was a sign of things to come. A bad Doctor, bad companions, a bad series-long arc that barely feels like it, and a holy shit cliffhanger that gets the dumbest resolution known to man. Next are the lousy stories with number 13, Revolution of the Daleks. The best thing about this episode was easily Jack Harkness. The rest of it was just eh. I do like the idea of the aftermath of companions who believe the Doctor is dead. Kind of a cool idea, which was already kind of shown in Parting of the Ways anyway, but everything else was dumb. We do see the return of Jack Robertson from Arachnids in the UK. You know, that character people loved so much. Yeah, he came back. This time, heading a Dalek invasion of his own design. Great. Adding to the one-dimensional evil nature of the character. Some of the effects are incredibly awful here, like Jack and the Doctor running down corridors, and you can tell they were just running in place in front of a green screen. It's honestly fucking hilarious. The overall story, as I said, was pretty dumb. It's a human taking advantage of Daleks. Just kind of sounds like a shittier version of the Ninth Doctor story Dalek to me. Except blown up to scale and add some other shit that isn't necessary. Another troubling thing that this episode has is that the Doctor fucking kills a TARDIS and acts like it's nothing. Like, you yourself have said multiple times that TARDISes are sentient and are living creatures, and you killed one like it meant nothing. As well as the Daleks falling for such a dumbass trick. Crap episode with one or two neat ideas, and I don't totally hate the human redesign of the Daleks. Number 12, Rosa. Yeah, really didn't care for this one either. The biggest thing being is that the villain is extremely one-dimensional. That pretty much causes this story to fall almost completely apart. The story in and of itself is fine. It does have that trademark of grinding the entire episode to a halt to develop characters, and at points, some of the racism was a tad bit over-exaggerated. I'm not saying for the entirety of the episode, because the exaggerated racism does very much fit the bill for the time, but just at some points, few and far between, it went a bit too far. But the biggest fault this episode has is its villain. Krasko is literally just the personification of racism. That's it. That's the character. Now, I'm not saying make him sympathetic or the hero of his own story and blah, 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 but give him a little bit more meat and intrigue rather than just evil white guy is evil. It's because of this that the episode falls flat, because the villain is so ridiculous that I can't take it seriously. Number 11, Spyfall. Literally the only reason that people like this story is because of the master reveal. That's it. But in reality, it's really not that good. It tries to be this James Bond-esque story, and it's marginally interesting, but ends up falling flat once again. You have the Doctor jumping from location to location, and the Doctor being racist again. Revealing the Master's skin color to Nazis, despite the fact that he would have been caught in the first place. What a hero. Anyway, the subplot with the companions is dull as always, Barton is a boring villain, and the Kasavans are a marginally interesting race with some high-concept ideas, but the story doesn't really do anything interesting with them. Mainly because they were just pawns in the Master's game, which I feel lessens the impact a bit. Then you have the stuff with the Timeless Child crap and Gallifrey being destroyed fucking again, and it's just a goddamn headache. So yeah, not the worst episode ever, but it has too many idiotic elements that prevent it from being better. Now we have reached the mediocre stories with number 10, The Legend of the Sea Devils. Honestly, this is pretty much just a run-of-the-mill story with very little to it. It's got some decent story ideas, the Sea Devils are nice to see, and it looks very cinematic. But I had pretty much no investment in this story whatsoever. None of the characters were memorable except maybe the kid character, and the CGI at points is pretty bad. Cheap practicals I can forgive, but when there's fan films with no budget that have better CGI than this, it's pretty fucking bad. In terms of Third Doctor villains written by Chibnall, this is not as good as the Silurian two-parter in Series 5, even though that isn't incredibly great either, but at least the design of the Sea Devils is leaps and bounds better than the Silurians, so I'll give it that. Number 9. The Saranga Conundrum. There's very little to say about this one, because it's just kinda there. It exists. That's honestly the best I can say about it. The villain is kinda dumb, and the resolution is pretty much just him fucking off and being someone else's problem, which is a bit stupid. But it's not offensively stupid or anything, it's just there. Okay. Number 8. The Witchfinders. This episode should have been so much better, because this was another episode that should have had its premise and commentary served on a silver platter. It's not mind-numbingly stupid like Kerblam, but the fact it does not take advantage of its premise makes this worse than it could have been. The Witch Trials is a time period that could make for a great dark Doctor Who story. For instance, take advantage of the overwhelming fear people were having at the time. Like, have the villain almost not be a villain at all. Just showcasing the worst of humanity during this time. Maybe have it like the villain, quote unquote, is an alien scientist that is simply watching humanity for some reason, and have it be like a mystery, thinking they were the person causing all of this, but in reality, they're simply a watcher, and it's just humanity being terrible. It could bring up some interesting themes and possibly bring about the Doctor's more alien side and their problems with humanity. Some of the worst parts of our history really being showcased. But no, we just get a Monster of the Week storyline. Cool, I guess. It's fine, but it could have been so much better. Alan Cumming is great as King James, but Cumming is a great actor, so that shouldn't be surprising. Overall, I probably would have rated it a bit higher, but I knocked it down half a point because of the lost potential, and the villain being, for the most part, forgettable. Next is the only decent story with number 7, The Vanquishers. I remember thinking the episode was fine. It had a lot of jumping around, like a typical Chibnall story, but I think it relatively tied an incredibly weak plot together, pretty much. I'm not saying it's good or it makes sense, but it had some decent story beats that made sense of the entire season. I like how the Doctor was split into 3 different versions of herself. That was kind of cool. I wish it was more like Batman the Brave and the Bold episode, where Batman gets split into 3 different versions of himself, but they reflect 3 different personalities of the same character: the detective, the brute, and the slacker. Here, it could have been interesting to see the Doctor essentially have 3 different personalities, and each of those personalities pertains to the problem that they are in. Like, one is captured, oh, that's the one good with gadgets, so she uses that to get herself out. Something like that. But overall, it's decent. It works. It had some good story beats, had a good idea or two, but falls into the Chibnall trademarks of jumping to a million different locations, grinding the episode to a halt to deliver character moments, paying off shit from 5 episodes ago, nostalgia bait, and all that shit. Next are the adequate stories with number 6, Resolution. Pretty much all the adequate stories are almost good. They have a lot of pretty good elements in them, but lack a special touch that could have made them better. With this episode, this very much tries to bring back the idea of a threatening Dalek. It fails because it's not incredibly interesting, but I like that it's a very small and personal story, and there is the idea of a Dalek doing so much with so little. I like the build-up to the threat, how there is an air of mystery to the entire thing and what the threat actually is. Ryan's character moments with his dad felt like padding and a piss-poor attempt at an arc for him, despite Daniel Adegboyega trying his best with subpar material. Honestly, I kind of wanted him to be a companion because he had more personality in one episode than Cole as Ryan in his entire run. This love story between the possessed woman and her coworker was kind of cute, and it did bring that human element. Again, this is sort of a grab bag of ideas that could have worked under a better writer, but goddamn does it fail. It's an adequate effort, but not a ton outside of that. But I still somewhat commend what it does do. Number 5, Village of the Angels. This could have been a great reintroduction of the Weeping Angels, since the last few times they only had cameo appearances or were just mentioned, or just not good. I like the stuff with the Doctor, Claire, and Jericho barricading themselves in the house while the angels try to get in, even though that is Signs levels of idiocy.
They mastered spaceflight, but they can't get through a wooden door?
It still has plenty of creepy, intense moments, and the subplot with the companions actually works here and can fulfill Chibnall's weird fetish of having 20 million different plot lines in one story. However, what doesn't work is the connection to the Timeless Child crap with the Division, as well as the overarching storyline with the Flux. As well as the stuff with Claire is kind of confusing. The way she spoke to the Doctor in Halloween Apocalypse is like she was displaced in time by a weeping angel already, and then got displaced again. But we find out here is that she's psychic. then why did she talk to the Doctor like, oh, you haven't met me yet, but you will? The Doctor never technically met you at all. She knew you from before this happened, and then she met you again. It's not like in Blink where Sally sees the Doctor on the screen after he met her in the future when she hasn't met him yet. She literally meets the Doctor and then meets her again. I feel like there was supposed to be something else in regards to this, like there was supposed to be some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, but then it was either abandoned or Chibnall is just that much of a fucking idiot. I choose to believe the latter. I think the reason that this episode was at least sort of competent was because of Maxine Alderton, who I pray gets a shot under Russell T Davies, because I feel she's a good writer who could spread her wings properly if given the chance. Pun intended. But overall, it's a tolerable episode that gets bombarded with dumb shit that prevents it from being better. Story of this era's life. Number 4, War of the Sontarans. So the final almost good episode. It has Sontar essentially being Russia and China here during what should be the Crimean War. It could have been a great and epic two-parter, but due to the fact it's inserted into Flux, again similar to Village, and only one part, it feels half-assed and rushed. Like the reason they're there only sort of makes sense. Of course Sontarans would try to rewrite human history because of their thirst for battle, but what does that have to do with the Flux? How do they take advantage of this universe-spanning event that is just killing everything to take over this little country on one small planet? I wouldn't say little, but you know what I mean. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but I feel like that doesn't make sense. If the Flux killed the Sontaran home planet and they needed to do battle elsewhere, then I can see that. But the way that it was showcased in the episode was kinda dumb. Then the ending was super rushed. They just fucking blow everything up, and then what, history is fine? How does that work? Russia and China are still fucking gone. So do they just magically appear again, or does this tie into the weird and vague powers of the Flux? It just doesn't make sense to me, I'm sorry. Then the subplots with the companions were dumb and sidetracked to the better parts of the episode. Other than those stupid things, the rest of the episode is fine. I liked how it showcased a figure in history people know little about, and the Sontaran redesign is fucking great. Way better than before. I know they showed up before this, but like in their specific episode, I wanted to state the redesign is great. It has some of those look how dumb the men are moments, but I've come to expect that with the show at this point. Fine effort, just has a lot of dumb in it that prevents it from being better, just like Village. Now to the good stories with number 3, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. This episode isn't massively amazing by any means, but I enjoyed some aspects, mainly Goran Viznik's portrayal of Nikola Tesla, even if he seemed a bit more mean-spirited than the reports of the actual man. The villain, while very on the nose, is kind of a unique idea. The overall story is a bit forgettable, but I remember liking the episode just fine despite some idiotic stuff throughout. Like all 3 companions being totally inept on who Nikola Tesla is, when at least Yaz and Ryan should know who he is since he's very big with millennials. But again, it's not great, but a perfectly fine and enjoyable story that is mostly carried by Viznik. Number 2, Eve of the Daleks. This was pretty much just a fun little episode. It doesn't have the same Chibnall trademarks, at least from what I've noticed. It was well-paced and enjoyable. Yaz and Dan were fine in the episode, but the standout was Aisling B. I think she is usually very funny, and here is no exception. The other guy, don't know his name, was okay, but kind of annoying at points. The Daleks are played more so for laughs here. They aren't like totally inept and stupid and silly, but they did have more comedy bits when it comes to their more serious appearances. Overall, in any other era, this wouldn't be anything special, but considering I actually somewhat was invested in the story and enjoyed my time with it, it's the second best 13th Doctor episode. Now to the only great story with number 1, The Haunting of Villa Diodati. The closest the 13th Doctor actually gets to being the Doctor. While yes, it does kind of retcon the Mary Shelley Big Finish stories, the continuity with those are so fucked that they probably could still be canon somewhere, so whatever. But outside of that, this was a really good and intriguing story. The characters actually seemed fleshed out, the mystery was actually interesting, and the actual villain of the piece, the Lone Cyberman, was quite good. It doesn't get greater than great, mainly because the companions are still very weak, and it ties into the awful 2-part series finale. It has some higher concept ideas that actually seem fleshed out here, like the house rearranging itself, the ghosts, and the overall mystery. The horror elements were good, the not-so-subtle references to Frankenstein were obvious, but not totally in your face, and the confrontation between the Doctor and the lone Cyberman was just fucking perfection. The confrontation between the two is one of the very few times where I saw Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. It is certainly the most memorable and the go-to of what this incarnation should have been. So while it does have some bad elements, they're really just nitpicks for an overall great story. Now we get to the companions. Let's get through this quickly. Plank of wood, slightly better plank of wood, the best plank of wood. Then we have Tegan Javanka. You know it's bad when the worst classic Who companion is better than the fucks we got in 13's Era, and was only there for one episode for fucking nostalgia bait. At least Tegan was memorable though. Don't get me wrong, it was for all the wrong reasons, but hey, it's something. She wasn't horrible here, but she did have me saying quite a few times, "Shut the fuck up, Tegan!" So she still sucks, and I still hate her, but fuck me, in this episode, she's still better than the Planks throughout their entire run. Next is Captain Jack. He was pretty much pointless in Fugitive and was fun to see in Revolution. Even though he's been away for quite a while, he does still do the role very well, even if a bit stilted at points and his age being a bit distracting. However, he's still great and I love the character. Then the best companion of 13's Era is technically Ace McShane. A character who was only there for an episode and for nostalgia bait, as I said before. Ace has always been one of the best classic Who companions, and Sophie Aldred is here to remind us why once again. She was essentially proto-New Who companion with having actual character development and having major arcs with her character, mainly in Curse of Fenrig. Here she's grown up but still stays true to her character in all the right ways. While the top spots are technically cheating, they're listed on the companion Wikipedia page, so it counts. Fuck off. Now we get to the Doctor and her era. So Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, in my eyes, barely feels like the character at all. She feels like a caricature of what the Doctor should be. I think the perfect way to describe her, and I mentioned this before, is that she feels like the 11th Doctor, but done worse. She does all the hallmarks of Smith, acting overly goofy and like a child, filibusters like a motherfucker, and tries to have these darker moments that she pushes down but comes out in certain situations. The difference is Matt Smith is a great actor and had good writing for the most part. Jodie Whittaker is just a good actor and had shit writing through most of her run, as well as the fact that through many of the episodes, Chris Chibnall left Jodie's parts blank so that she could improvise and find her way as the Doctor or whatever. That's not good. Unless your actor is Colin Baker or Peter Capaldi levels of talented, you cannot do that. You need to give your actor some sort of direction to go into. Sure, you can trust them to do some of it, but they need that extra push to go all the way. So even though I am a bit more forgiving of the actor over the writer, it is still partly her fault why her Doctor never got to a good point was because she couldn't improvise. So she essentially falls flat. It also doesn't help that her Doctor changes from episode to episode. Again, I blame that more on the writer. Sometimes she's a total coward, sometimes she's in your face, sometimes she's extremely angry for no reason, sometimes she's incredibly nice for no reason. It doesn't feel like different attributes of the same character. It feels like a tonally inconsistent character, almost like Clara in a way. On top of this, she barely feels like the Doctor, as I stated. There are so many moments that she acts out of character in terms of the Doctor as a whole. Yes, different Doctors can change things up, but they are, at the end of the day, the same person. So when this version does something or says something that does not match up with the 13 other people who have played this character before this fucking era, then sorry, she's out of fucking character. Being too socially awkward to give a man reassurance about his cancer possibly coming back, being pro-corporation, letting an entire species die in one of the most horrific ways, and calling it mercy, yeah, no fucking way would the Doctor do this. Now, I'm not saying that other Doctors haven't acted out of character either. The second Doctor being racist in The Two Doctors, and the fourth Doctor not defending Chinese people in Talons of Weng-Chiang. Those are moments that were essentially out of character as well, but the main difference is, those weren't habit. And the writing at the time was better there. Not by much in terms of the former, but still. To me, she simply does not fit what I would call the Doctor. If she does for you, then more power to you. But for me, I cannot see it. Now, in terms of her era, it's fucking shit. What do you want me to say? While I do give props to the fact that Chibnall didn't have returning monsters in Series 11, he backpedaled so fucking far for the last 2 seasons and the specials that it had to have been the BBC or something forcing him to do it, because goddamn did it do a complete 180. So much nostalgia bait in Series 12, 13, and especially the specials. And while there were better stories in those series and that bout of specials, it was still for the most part terrible. I mean, only 7 stories out of 29 are, in my eyes, positive in any way. Less than half of those stories are what I consider to be good, and then only one of those 3 I think is a genuinely great story. That is not exactly at a good standing in terms of this era. It just comes from the fact it has too many of the same tropes being used over and over and over and over again, like the character development seeds that grind everything to a halt and only stop to resume the plot, as well as Chris Chibnall having his hand in the cookie jar for almost all of it. He was credited as a writer for 22 of the 29 stories, with 6 only having a co-writing credit. I actually did the math, and Chibnall wrote 76% of the stories, while Russell T. Davies wrote half, and Stephen Moffat a little bit less than half with 47%. That is bonkers. You need to give some other people a chance. I know the people who did write an episode all on their own wrote shit like Orphan 55, Kerblam, and Demons of the Punjab, but you could get some good ones like Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror and The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Chris Chibnall was way too much of a puppet master here, and it shows in the long run. While he can be a good writer, Broadchurch is very much proof of that. He can't write sci-fi and Doctor Who specifically, because it's just terrible. Again, if you like this era and Jodie, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. But for me, it was an absolute chore to sit through, and with that, I rank her last. So, that's it for the 13th Doctor era and this version of Doctor Who Ranked for a while. I guess in about a year, I'm going to be doing the quote-unquote 14th Doctor, as that's only 3 episodes, or one story that's 3 episodes, I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see. But I do have plans for some future Doctor Who Ranked videos that you may or may not be expecting. Have a good rest of the year, and have a good New Year's. See you later.